This is my very big granite pied female nightshade. And today I wanted to talk about when do you decide to actually start breeding your own rodents as food for your snakes. And personally, I started off actually very early on. I think within the first year or so, I had maybe at that point 5 or 6 snakes, no more than 10 at the most. And in the area I'm in Pittsburgh, it's a bigger city. It's not the biggest city. It actually wasn't very easy to find rodents at that time outside of going to reptile shows, and it wasn't always easy for me to get to all the reptile shows locally. And some of the snakes that I was bringing in weren't readily taking frozen thawed stuff. So I decided to build my own, DIY rat rack, like a 4 tub one. I was just breeding basically the bare minimum for rats that I had. And that took care of what I needed it to do. I was able to produce enough adults and babies to feed my collection. I was able to actually freeze some stuff off as well. And so I did it almost right away. But, when is a good time for you to start thinking about it? If you're starting to build a collection, it's basically, I would say, from the get-go. If you're going to plan on, if you have 1 or 2 snakes, it's not necessary. It's easy enough to go to the store and buy a rat or two, or to just hopefully try to get them transitioned to frozen thawed. But once your collection starts to grow, you're going to run into the issue that they're not all going to take the same types of prey. And I'm at the point now where I'm breeding Norwegian rats, or Norway rats, whatever you want to call them, traditional rats. I'm breeding ASFs, and I'm breeding mice. Now I think I'm going to try to transition out of breeding rats. My colonies that I have are pretty old. They're, 3 years old, and they're probably at the point where they're probably close to, if not already, inbreeding. And I don't want to do that. So I need to transition them out anyways, and I'd have to get new stock. And I'm thinking of actually just getting rid of them and trying to stick to ASFs and mice, because most of my bigger snakes that only take live will take ASFs from what I've seen. I don't think I have any that are just rat-only snakes. But I do still have some that refuse anything other than mice. And that's, with ball pythons, something you're going to be stuck with. Eventually, you're going to get a snake that's not going to eat what you have available. They're not going. If you're only breeding ASFs, there's going to be a snake that wants a mouse. If you're only breeding rats, there's going to be a snake that wants an ASF. There's actually quite a few snakes that I didn't actually start breeding ASFs till probably around this time last year, that I couldn't get them on food after purchasing them. Now, these are usually snakes that picky eaters are usually snakes that I purchased from somewhere, not that I bred myself. And I think that's the case probably with most people. But I couldn't get them to eat. And as soon as I started getting ASFs, I had a great turnaround in how easy it was to feed my snakes. So, if you have 1 or 2 snakes or ball pythons, you don't need to breed rodents for food. But as soon as you start thinking about growing it or filling out even a small rack, it's probably a good idea, because it will, at the end of the day, save you a bunch of money. It gets very expensive to continuously have to buy live prey. Plus, you either have to drive to get it, or meet somebody somewhere, or wait for a show to come around, and there's the chances that you're running out of prey in between those events. Now, what I personally do now is I breed my rodents for live purposes only. I do keep frozen thawed stuff. At this point, I would say, let's see, I try to get all of my holdbacks onto frozen thawed at some point in the first couple months. Out of this rack of these ones that I have left in this grow out rack, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 13 here are taken frozen thawed. The other ones are not. And I don't try too hard anymore at trying to switch them over. So I would probably say, less than 15% of everything I have at this point is frozen thawed. But I do keep stock. I have a couple freezers where I keep stock of frozen thawed, and I usually buy my rodents from ARS. They, from what I saw, had pretty much the best prices and the best quality. So I buy my racks from ARS, and I buy my rodents from ARS. But it's a lot more cost effective, even if you have a very small amount of room, to actually breed your own rodents. I started off with just a 4-bin DIY rack. In my old house, we had a small laundry room in the basement, which was the only place that I really had space to put my snakes and my rodents. So that's all I had space for. Is I had one of actually this 70-30. I had this rack, and I had a space for one rat rack, and that's all I could fit in there. So that's what I did, and I made do. And it made life a lot easier because I didn't have to wait for reptile shows to buy rodents. I didn't have to try to scour to see if there's somebody locally trying to do it. You waste a lot of time doing that. Rodents, especially in small quantities, don't take a serious ton of time to care for. I spend a half a day once a week basically in terms of cleaning them all. You have to spot check for food to make sure they have enough food during the week, but other than that, it's not a ton of work, and you're probably spending more time trying to drive around and figure out where you're going to get meals for your next snakes for. Now, if you have a reliable supplier that has good prices, that's completely different. In my area, that wasn't the case. Back then, I didn't have reliable suppliers, and the prices weren't necessarily extremely cost effective to me doing that all the time. So that's when I decided to actually breed for myself. So I know there are some people that I've talked to where they don't have the ability to breed, don't have the space to breed rodents, and they spend 3, 4, 5 times more money per month just purchasing rodents versus being able to breed them, and what I spend on them, food wise. So yeah, it's a big cost if you have to continuously buy live prey. It adds up very fast. Now there's also, the infrastructure thing. Like I have, turn you around here. I have 2 professional racks. I have this Freedom Breeder one on the right, and I have the ARS one back there tucked in the corner. So there's also the cost of that. They're very expensive. You're spending thousands of dollars to get these set up if you're doing it this method. You can do the DIY racks, but they take up more space, and I don't have a ton of space to put them in here, so I had to end up going with the professional racks. So there's that upfront cost, but I would say within a year it probably pays for itself. And then I ran, I have, I don't know if you'll be able to see that all the way back there. I had a plumber run a water line into here, and I have that pressure regulator, and I just ran, this water line here all the way through the roof over to this side of the snake room, and that's what's feeding the water to these snake racks. So they have a constant supply of water. I don't have to worry about filling 5-gallon buckets all the time. It just makes life a lot easier. So I will always breed rodents. It's probably my least favorite part of having snakes. I love the rodents. They're awesome animals. I used to keep pet rats. They're some of the smartest pets that I've ever had. They can be cuddly at times. Obviously they poop a lot, which is not very cool. Some of the mice that I produce out of here every once in a while are really cool looking, and I love, my nephews love coming over and picking them up and playing with them. But the poop, and every once in a while when one dies for whatever reason, natural causes, and you don't find it right away and it stinks, it's not the fun part of the job. I wish I had the ability to build a rat shed out in the backyard. I don't have a ton of space for it because we're sort of on a hillside. So I have limited space that's flat, and I don't want to waste it on a shed. The other problem is here in Pittsburgh, it can get really cold in the winter, and I don't want to have to heat it. And I also don't want to have to trudge outside in the middle of the winter to get rats. I try to prevent myself from having to spend too much time outside in the winter. I'm not a big fan of it. So they're stuck here in the snake room, in our basement. So, there are positives and negatives to all of it. That's obviously a negative to me about keeping them. That which would be a positive in the line of, not having to keep them here and being able to buy them from somebody else. But again, that raises the prices and how much money you're spending on a weekly or monthly basis to feed your animals. So keep that in mind. If you start building your collection at a pretty decent clip, once you're getting close to double-digit snakes, or maybe even a little before that, you really need to think about how you're going to feed them, because that's sort of, other than caging, probably the next biggest hurdle is how are you going to supply food to them every week. And I think I've never been into a large-scale reptile breeding facility. I would assume that that's probably the issue half the time with them. Maybe that it just takes too much time to feed them all, so they don't all get fed on a routine basis, or they don't have enough food to feed them all on a routine basis because they're running low on rodents. You don't want to run into that issue. I've actually run into that issue myself, where what I was producing actually wasn't enough for what I had here, which is part of the reason why I'm getting rid of rats and switching to ASFs. They have bigger litters. They take longer to grow to a decent sized meal for some of these snakes, but they produce bigger litters, so that should hopefully keep more, keep the production up and keep more bellies full. So figure it out pretty early on. If you're not just keeping one pet snake, you really probably want to think about, even on very small scale, starting to produce your own food for your ball pythons.